engaging story where the fairy tale ends and real life begins.
When I moved into a street mission and married a street minister, I really didn't understand how the future would unfold.
Love stories with practical ways to strengthen your relationship.
Her mom said, well, she's practically engaged to this lovely Christian man. And I said to her, well, I don't see a ring on her finger.
Strengthening your marriage, one story at a time.
The whole point of National Marriage Week is to get people to get involved with strengthening the marriages in the United States.
Now this is Engaging Story.
Season 2, I'm Matt.
And this is Becca.
And we are honored today to have BJ and Sheila Weber on the show. They're an incredible couple from New York City, have lived in Manhattan for their entire marriage. They share their passion about marriage and how to build stronger marriages in our society.
Sheila is the founder of the National Marriage Week, which will be February 7th through the 14th. And that helps strengthen individual marriage, reduce the divorce rate, and build a culture that fosters strong marriages.
Here's a quote from Newsweek magazine talking about National Marriage Week. They say, National Marriage Week presents a chance to focus on rebuilding a culture of marriage for this generation. Sheila has done over 500 media appearances talking about the importance of strengthening marriages in our culture and about National Marriage Week. Reverend William John, aka BJ Weber, has lived in New York City since 1979. For more than a dozen years, BJ served as a chaplain for the World Series champion New York Yankees. He's the co-founder of, get this, of more than 25 inner-city ministries, including the East Harlem Little League, Youth Impact, Pregnancy Help, Brooklyn Little League, and many more. We also got to hear from BJ some insights of what he's learned through years of doing crisis marriage counseling. He counsels couples who are on the verge and the brink of divorce, and he shares some of the key things that have been causing the rift in these relationships.
I love how Sheila's and BJ's mission is to decrease divorce rate in order to divorce poverty. They both have a passion for strengthening marriages so that children can stay in a two-parent home. One of the main areas that Sheila and BJ concentrate in Manhattan, New York, filled with lots of young millennial professionals. And what they have encountered is that these millennials are not getting married. They do not see any benefit in marriage. They've either come from divorced, broken homes. They see marriage as a hindrance. And so instead of having marriage conferences, they're getting singles together and promoting marriage, life on life with them, telling them about how marriage can be good, how it can be wonderful. And that goes back to their mission, which is promoting marriage and their National Marriage Week.
Their website, nationalmarriageweekusa.org. We'll also link it up at our website, engagingstory.com. It has lots of resources to help strengthen your marriage. They've got a national calendar of marriage conferences, marriage seminars, and different tools and tips and resources to help you. Be sure to check out our new iTunes review tutorial. We give you the 101 on how to leave a review at iTunes because since we're a new podcast, iTunes reviews greatly help us grow the podcast and expose the podcast to new people. We love reading the reviews and getting your feedback, and the way iTunes works is the more reviews we get, the more they will feature our podcast in their store. Each episode kicks off with a song that was significant in our guest's life. Today, it's a classic. Love Is Here to Stay by Frank Sinatra.
The radio and the telephone and that we know may just be passing fancies and in time may go, but oh my dear, our love is here to stay.
Well, we were laughing about this today because I am a singer, and I sang a song at our wedding reception, and this sort of dates us a little bit. So I stood up on stage and sang this song because my husband started out as a street minister in New York City, and I sang the Carole King song that goes, if you want to live in New York City, honey, you know I will.
Yes, I will, yes, I will. I never thought I
And we have been here for 36 years of our marriage.
That's so cool. And we this is the first intro to a podcast where we've actually had someone sing the song. So that's awesome.
I like that.
And then just about every birthday, I tend to sing "Our Love Is Here to Stay." That has become our new, our new song.
Go ahead and tell us how you guys met.
Well, that's kind of a fun story. I was a street minister in Times Square and working with teenage runaways and drug addicts and young children that were being prostituted. And so we had a friend of ours who was eager to introduce us. I didn't know that. That was supposed to be some sort of a blind date. And when I saw Sheila, it was clearly not a blind date. I had my eyes wide open.
So my parents came to New York from Washington, D.C. and wanted to see this mission center called the Lands, which is no longer there, but was where BJ was working. And I had come to New York City to work as a writer at McCall's Magazine and was attending another church. But this friend of mine who knew me had just met BJ, who had come from seminary in Iowa. And in the back of her mind, she wanted us to meet. So she thought she arranged for him to give my family a tour of this mission center, but he was running late. He was playing rugby, and somebody else showed us around. We went next door to a Chinese restaurant. There were about 12 people in this group, and BJ runs into the restaurant covered in mud with his little rugby shorts on, and he says, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry, the subway was late and the game was late." And really he was just looking the crowd over to see if it was worth his time. And he caught my eye and he said, "I'm going to get a shower. I'll be back in 10 minutes. So he sat across from my mom and my dad at one end of the table, and I was way down at the other end, and I could see him looking at me the whole night. And he basically started interviewing my parents.
It's true. It was my first date with Sheila was with her parents, and I asked them all sorts of questions, and her mom said, "Well, she's practically engaged to this lovely Christian man." And I said to her, "Well, I don't see a ring on her finger, and she's free game for me."
That was
awesome.
that wasn't actually. My mother was overstating. This was not a serious relationship I was in, and so it was actually something that was sort of iffy. So BJ just asked everybody to open up their fortune cookies at this Chinese restaurant, and everyone went around the table, and he was the last one to read his.
And so, just with the great rugby flair that might belong to me, I said, "Eureka! Today's your lucky day. You're going to meet a beautiful woman who works for McCall's Magazine." And her mother goes, "I can't believe it says that's amazing."
Yeah, my mom actually thought that's what the paper said. So that's how he introduced himself to me, and in front of my dad asked for my phone number, and we had I didn't actually take him all that seriously. He was quite a character, and I thought, wow. He asked me to go out for lunch, and I thought, well, what's the harm? It's just lunch. And this other guy and I were sort of calling it quits. And so BJ, at first, I really didn't take it all that seriously, because here he was, a street minister in Times Square, living on $40 a week and living in a mission. And I'm thinking, what is that all about? But we dated for 5 months before he proposed, which was pretty quick. I was 23 and he was 32, so he was very ready, and I was still feeling like I had a lot of things to do professionally. And anyway, he proposed the night before I was to be gone for 3 months. I was an actress in the Jesus film.
Call his name Jesus.
Spirit of the Lord is upon me.
And was doing the national public relations media tour, and he's decided, I'm going to be gone for 3 solid months. So
I wanted to kind of seal the deal some way, shape, or form. I didn't have a ring. I had an IOU for the ring. I didn't have any money, so I gave her an IOU. And,
especially after your own thoughts.
I don't see a ring on her finger.
Yeah,
Again, right?
exactly. That's right. He should have been putting that ring on that finger.
Said, "I'm not going to say no, and I'm not going to say yes. I'll say maybe." And for me, that was totally yes. So,
yeah, he asked me frequently, almost every week for the next 3 or 4 months, and I kept saying I'm still praying about it. So for those guys out there that are feeling really defeated, by a young woman who is needing to take time. I was just needing to process this, and I knew I didn't really want to say goodbye to him. I just needed to see. I hadn't actually gone back to his hometown. I needed to meet his family and the people that were significant to him. So I just felt there was more ground to cover. But
yeah. So I came to Christ at a monastery in Iowa.
Is this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
And through that monastery, I ended up involved with the local female equivalent called Our Lady of the Mississippi Abbey, because the guy that introduced me to Christ became their chaplain, and I went with him to this cloister group of nuns. So these sisters became very dear to me and were very instrumental in my life and praying for me and supporting me through my mission efforts. And so when I told the Mother Superior, who was my dear friend, Mother Columba, that I was seeking to get married, she was very eager to meet Sheila. And so Sheila came out to the monastery to meet Mother Columba and all the sisters, and that was a very pivotal time in our relationship.
Well, and I should explain, too, BJ was not raised Catholic, and neither one of us are or were, but he walked out to buy some homemade monk's bread at age 26 to this cloistered Trappist monastery, and the abbot had a 3-hour conversation with him that led him to have a profound conversion and a Damascus Road experience after BJ had been involved with the campus radical days of the 60s and the anti-war movement, and he was really coming out of the whole kind of anarchy of the 60s and the early 70s. So that's a backdrop. These wonderful monks and nuns really nurtured him in a life of prayer, focusing on prayer and scripture, and sort of the most pure form of focusing on your spiritual life. So I had to be interviewed by a Mother Superior of the Abbey, and but it was a very profound experience of spiritual discernment, so I valued it.
And that's when she said yes. She was at the Convent of Mississippi Abbey, and she had a discernment during that time.
I took 3 days of silent prayer retreat, which they do receive guests who come on retreat to just have quiet and prayer and time of contemplation, and that's what I did. And that was the time frame and the means by which I made a decision. And it was a big leap of faith to move into a mission in Times Square in the days when it was not Disneyland. It was a very dangerous place, and we lived in a mission house with about 40 other residents and stayed there for 5 years, and then started another ministry in New York City where we have still been, and now, completely unexpectedly, we now have a 4-story brownstone in Midtown Manhattan where we host visitors from all over the world. And BJ, during all these recent years, have been the chaplain of the New York Yankees, and we've led a lot of professional Bible study groups and done a lot of interesting things in the last several decades. Just
to back up a little bit with the sisters, so I had no money, right? Mm-hmm. Literally. And so the sisters provided an engagement and wedding ring for me. They paid for that, and they gave me this is a wonderful remembrance for all of us. Mm-hmm. It was really a beautiful friendship that we're still involved with them over 40 years later.
That is awesome.
That is a beautiful story.
Mm-hmm. It is.
My dad was a minister in Washington, D.C., so we were married in Washington, D.C., and had a lot of New York friends come down for it. But
yeah, I was sitting with her father, who had done hundreds of weddings, apparently, and so Sheila and her father were sitting together, and I had all these incredible ideas about the wedding. And so her father and Sheila looked at each other, then looked at me, and Sheila said, "Honey, I think we got this."
Yeah, I just said, you just show up. We're handling the details. He was kind of a novice to the world of wedding planning. 3 weeks before our wedding, looked at my husband and screamed, "What have you done?" And he thought that his hair had been very limp and thin, so he let a friend talk him into getting a perm. And I'm like totally freaking out. I'm thinking, of all the times in your life, why would you mess around with what you look like? So, fortunately, 3 weeks later, all that little frizzy curl relaxed a little bit.
Yes.
And there's no Instagram post we can look back on, so.
Well, I should find a picture of that. Oh, gosh.
You guys got married and then sounds like started life in New York City, marriage life. Was it what you expect? Was just being married what you expected?
Well, my wife cried every day for the first year of our marriage. That might tell you something about living in a street mission and what it meant to live with me. So.
Yeah, I would say it was a total shock. And but here we are, 36 years into marriage and enjoying each other an awful lot these days. We really enjoy each other a lot. And we have a son who's 31 and married and a daughter who's 29 and married. And ever since they went off to college, we have sort of rediscovered just the joy of our companionship and enjoying our time together. I think that's one of the things I would like to share with people who are in the thick of raising their children at any stage, which causes stress, is that there are these moments to look forward to. And I mean, in the midst of the raising the children, those are happy times too. It depends on how you handle them and manage them. But
I think we've also maintained kind of a lot of fun, even in difficult years raising kids and in some very trying situations, living in a mission where the AIDS epidemic broke out and people were dying, and I mean some tremendously stressful situations in our own ministry life.
The early days that we were in a street mission were very unusual place to start your marriage. And, BJ we had a very tiny apartment, as New Yorkers usually have. And the grocery store was about a 20-minute walk. Nothing was easy. And there were street people coming in and out of the ground floor of this building. And BJ was always on call, sort of an overload of people constantly right there in the middle of your life. It's kind of like living in a dorm, being married, living in a dormitory.
But one story about a friend of ours, we met on the rugby field. He was a cocaine addict and just a druggy guy, really. He went to school at Columbia University, got his MBA at Columbia. But through our friendship, he had come to Christ, and just beautifully, really. But he was sleeping on our couch for like a week or something, and as he was getting sober and coming to Christ, and Sheila said, "Honey, Bobby's been on our couch for 2 weeks. We've just been married. Maybe it's a good idea that he moves along." So, by the way, just as a sidebar, Bobby went on to establish the largest inner-city Little League in America, and now runs Chicago Hope Academy. It's the only evangelical Christian school in Chicago. He and his wife and 7 children dearly love the Lord, and his business and school are an extraordinary fruit of the Spirit, really magnificent. Really.
Mm-hmm. So once you had your children, did you still kind of have like the boarding house and have people coming and going and staying with you, or was it different then?
Well, we stayed at the Lambs Mission for 5 years and then moved to a neighborhood, Kips Bay, Murray Hill, in Midtown, east side of Manhattan. And then we had our first child. So we did not bring our first child into the mission environment. We had an apartment on 2 floors of the brownstone, and then we started something called the New York Fellowship, which is a ministry that is the outlet for my husband's private pastoral care with leaders in New York City. And we've launched many projects for the poor through the New York Fellowship. So we had our son, and then 2 years later had our daughter. So really, in our entire married life, we have only lived in 2 places, and those were 10 blocks apart from each other. And it's something that we did not expect. I did not expect. I have really no very clear vision. When I moved into a street mission and married a street minister, I really didn't understand how the future would unfold. So, life is a walk of faith, and we trusted God to lead us and give us discernment about each decision as it came along. I think that is the biggest asset that any marriage can have, is that they are both prayerfully seeking God's will at all times together. One of the things that BJ does now is he has a lot of friends who refer to him, their friends who are in crisis. So he has kind of an open door policy for marriages in crisis through our friendships that get referred to him.
I do a thing called brief, intense counseling I don't know how else to describe it, but I'll take a couple for, 10 to 12 hours a week for 3 or 4 weeks, just kind of walk through the sorrows and the issues that need to be addressed, and not in kind of a therapeutic environment, but more like in a coaching environment, like reality therapy. Like, if you continue down this road, your children will have a devastating experience if you get a divorce. I mean, it's that type of reality that people need to know. They just think that they can have amicable divorces. I know there's no such thing like as a friendly rugby game, right? There's no such thing as an amicable divorce.
Right.
I don't know if you want to generically speak to some of the issues that you tend to see.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Like some of the key things that you're seeing happening in just marriage and culture today.
I think there's an inability to really understand a person's language, how we approach each other with words. Words matter, and accusatory words. And the great lessons from Love and Respect, I've used that in many, many opportunities to talk about differences of men and women differences, how we function. And women have the greatest emotional need is to be loved. Men's greatest emotional need is to be respected. And then to have that kind of dialogue with a couple is eye-opening. Also, the idea of forgiveness. So many people and couples hang on and in an accusatory way just blast each other. Do you remember the time that you said this to me? Well, you've always done that. You've never been where you're supposed to. All that type of language, it keeps piling on, and it's kind of a foundation of despair that these couples are building for themselves. And most couples come to me in crisis because they have been living in denial and also just trying to maintain their marriage through white-knuckling it, right? And so finally something comes to a head and something falls apart. And either it's an affair, an emotional affair, or some awareness of lack of attention to each other, alcohol, drugs, participation in all that sorrow. So there is really kind of all those areas built into a person where they have no ability to really come to grips with a deep understanding of what they really need from each other. And they need to have community. And community used to speak to these issues, right? But at this point, they're pretty much abandoned, and they don't have a sense of community or friendship or talking about real issues.
Well, I can speak to, I think our stresses over 36 years happened more when we were raising children, and this is so typical that a husband is at the prime of his career and gone a lot and taking a lot of time away from the family. I think it's an exhaustion issue, and whether today it's a young mother who is also working and that adds to the exhaustion, or just even a mother who stays home but doesn't get enough rest, or the marriage itself doesn't get enough time and attention. And so one of our children had ADD, and I just had to be present Sunday through Thursday night. I couldn't go anywhere to get our son through a rigorous private school in New York City. He went on to a wonderful university, but this is very common that families are watching over their children's academic needs, and I would say that you just have to pay attention to each other. You have to find times to get a sitter and go out as a couple and just make sure you have fun, make sure you have dinners and go to movies, and get away from your household to focus on yourselves, so people can be intentional about that. I just think that's a huge part of it. Some of the work that I do, I'm very research-based, and I know that there's research that shows that the majority of couples who have pushed through conflict and stayed together 5 years later are very happy that they did not abandon their marriage. And I'd like to just share encouragement with people that I have a very good friend who was separated for 5 years, and they restored their marriage after 5 years separation, and they're thrilled now because now it's been 15 or 20 years and they are enjoying 6 grandchildren together. Yeah. She actually wrote a book that's very valuable for people. It's called Every Reason to Leave, Vicki Rose. They tell their story in a beautiful way, specifically for people who feel like there's no hope.
Speaking of books, resources, mentors, are there any in your life, in your marriage, I guess, that you guys have gone to? And then we'll talk about how you guys are kind of mentors and resources today for marriages.
We love Emerson stuff. Emerson Eggerich's Love and Respect, his books, and go to the heart of the matter, and very practical. I think there's more of a spirituality that I really engage in relationship to marriage. I would be more inclined to think on terms of a book like Breathe In Underwater, which is totally off most people's charts, but it's a beautiful book about reflecting deeply on who you are and your limitations. And so often we don't see ourselves in light of our limitations. We see ourselves in light of being hurt, or broken, or limited, or accused. And I think the self-discovery in Christ, where you start to see yourself and how you can change. And so I like kind of the 12-step motif, and that my life's out of control and unmanageable. And I think that is when God uses us in our weakness, and that's really a powerful place to begin to grow together.
I know that the Love and Respect message hit me very hard. When I first learned the concepts, my son was turning to be 13 years old, and not only did I understand that my own tone and language impacted how my husband heard what I had to say, but it also was affecting how I communicated with my teenage son, who was venturing into manhood. And, even as a mother, when your child is 8 years old, you say, gosh, it's really cold outside. I'm cold, so put the sweater on. And you're very directive. Well, you can't continue to use those tones as your son becomes a man. And it was very helpful for me to know that my son needed to hear what I had to say with him in tones of respect. Otherwise, he would interpret it as derision or putting him down, or it could hurt his self-esteem. That also was something that I took to heart when I realized that the things I needed to say to my husband, if I said them the wrong way, I'd never really realized that he would feel disrespected. So because we're both people of goodwill, I needed to reaffirm to him that I know that he's a man of goodwill. And I had to find ways to say things that did not make him feel diminished.
Well, by the way, our son is a fireman in New York City. My wife still will remind him to be careful.
I've done a study with a group of young women in studying Tim Keller's book, The Meaning of Marriage. That is quite profound. I would say that anybody that wants to do a group study, that is a very profound and wonderful book.
Also, for couples that are on the verge of divorce and have children, I refer them to a book by Judith Wallerstein, a Jewish sociologist, who wrote a book called The Unexpected Despair of Divorce. It's in relationship to the consequences of divorce in a child's life. And it's really quite profound.
Legacy?
It might be Unexpected Legacy of Divorce, that's right. But it's also a great resource book, especially when you're at the very last step and they still have affection for their children, and they're trying to sort out what it means that we could kind of really balance this off now. The kid, and I often will hear this, the children are so much better off if we're divorced. And, that is one of those lies that are perpetrated in that kind of conversation. And certainly secular counselors agree with that and push that in many, many ways. And now I'm not condoning abuse or anything else. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that when people see the consequences and the sorrow and the despair and the impact on of a child, it is really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, that sounds like a good resource.
Yeah.
We have been blessed without a major trauma. It's not to say they won't be coming in the future, but for our nuclear family, there has been no cancer and no problems with infidelity, substance abuse, any of those major traumas. So we've been fortunate, but we've also been very aware to pay attention so that those things don't come up behind you unawares, that you're not surprised by things that could slip into your lives. We've been very attentive to make sure that we protect ourselves that way. But I do think that early on, when our children were grade school age, I think that we got so busy that it took us a while to figure out that we needed time alone as a family. Our lives were sort of a constant revolving door of other people. and travel and constancy of people. And I think that one of our major lessons was to make sure we would pull away as a family. So we started renting a cottage in a place that was remote, and we chose not to have a television, and to this day, we still find a way to go somewhere where we unplug. It's a little harder now. Unfortunately, the internet is sort of invading everywhere.
Yeah.
but to go somewhere where there's no television. So I recommend that families look for seasons and places where they can unplug, literally the phone, the internet, the TV, and just take walks and play board games after dinner and get back to some old-fashioned experiences.
And also, you need to be attentive to affection with each other, to be lovers, and to know that it's not just about having a sexual encounter, but rather to be together intimately and being vulnerable with each other and remembering each other and not lose track of that. And so often in a busy life, we do that, and that can cause tension.
So Sheila, tell us about National Marriage Week. It's coming up February 7th to 14th, and I guess just maybe a little history behind it, and then what's the goal of it? We love the tagline, let's strengthen marriage.
Well, National Marriage Week started in 2009. It has been happening in 20 countries around the world, and it's a messaging campaign to engage people, to strengthen their own marriage, and to reach out and help other people. So the intention is to have it be a focused week every year where communities and individuals and churches will host marriage classes, conferences, workshops, do something in their community to celebrate marriage or to help other people have a better chance at marriage. So we have the only online national calendar that exists where all kinds of groups can post whatever they're happening. They can post it online for free, and then you can go to another state and do a search of something that's happening near you. And we're looking to increase the number of events, sort of like the 4th of July, fireworks in every town. We're hoping that every town, every church in America will do something to support marriage. My own church in New York City this year is going to have a salon evening, and they're actually going to put forth the message more towards single people, because the challenge today is that single people are kind of abandoning marriage, and they're choosing to wait a very long time or just replace it with cohabitation. So my church is actually having a conversation night to talk about why marriage is great and how to become the kind of person who will have a good one. So we love all creative ideas, and that's the whole point of National Marriage Week, is to get people to get involved with protecting and strengthening the marriages in the United States.
So this last weekend we had a party here with a lot, like 50, 60 people, all rugby player types, because I was coaching rugby, but these are mid-20s to mid-30s, and we were hosting them, and so I end up in the kitchen with 5 of the girlfriends of the rugby guys, right? Mm-hmm. And they're asking me questions about marriage, and they want to know why these guys don't get off the dime. I said, well, you're living with them, right? Yeah. I said, well, what's the point? Where's marriage? What does marriage mean to them? It doesn't mean anything. I mean, ask them one time, what would it look like if we didn't sleep together? Mm-hmm. Would you still be interested in my friendship? And oh my goodness, it raised a firestorm. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what my next dinner party looks like.
It may double.
It's so true, though. That's what you hear now, millennials, that they're putting off marriage. Just being on Twitter, and I've seen so many comments of like, I'm in my 20s and the 30s, they'll say, I'm not going to get married. I just see so many bad things about marriage, and there's no point anymore. So I definitely think there is a need for the Christian people like you and mentors to come in and say, yes, marriage can be beautiful, it can be hard, but it's also wonderful, and this is how it can be done well.
Well, one of the things National Marriage Week is doing in 2017 is launching a Marriage is Worth It campaign. So we're actually asking people to send us 30-second cell phone videos on why they think marriage is worth it. To speak exactly to what you just mentioned, that the younger generation is afraid of marriage, or else they're living as if they were married, but there's no sense of security. I always say that this is like a consumer culture rather than a covenant. that a covenant, you really are, you're in it for the long haul. It's a vow, and in that vow, there's protection. I will say that in 36 years of marriage, because my husband and I knew we had made a vow not only to each other but to God, we just didn't give ourselves any other option but to work it out. We're like, well, we're in this, so we might as well make it fun. We might as well make it enjoyable rather than have it be a miserable experience. It's a great motivator to get better. But the consumer mindset these days is, you know what, if I don't really like you, it's like I'm going to take you back to the store and get a new model. We're always returning things to the store. It's sort of, that's what's happening today. So we do want to promote the benefits of marriage, that it actually is such a rich part of life. And people don't think about having someone be a witness to their whole life. They don't think about being 80 years old and who will be there for them and what will they feel like at the end of their days. Certainly not something a 25-year-old is thinking about today.
Right. Someone's going to be there when you're sick or going through hard times to support you. That you have that covenant relationship.
So we'd love for people to get involved with National Marriage Week, USA.org. You can go and register your email to hear periodic updates from us. And if people start any kind of marriage class or workshop, to put that information on our national calendar. It's free, and then other people can find out about what they're doing.
Such great wisdom. Thank you for sharing today, BJ and Sheila. Again, if you want to learn more about National Marriage Week, it's coming up February 7th to 14th. Check out our website, engagingstory.com. We've got links and more details there so you can get involved. And I wanted to quickly share the 3 goals of National Marriage Week. Number 1, they say they want to elevate marriage as a national issue in the media and with our policy leaders. Number 2, they want to promote the benefits of marriage, that stronger marriage brings economic stability to individuals and our nation. And number 3, they want to create, and they have created, a national calendar of existing trusted marriage classes, conferences, and events. Have you checked out our marriage artwork yet? We'd love to work with you and take your wedding photos or couple photos and pair them with a Bible verse that is significant in your marriage. You can see examples at our website, engagingstory.com. Just click Art in the menu. Is there a topic or subject you'd like us to cover? You know a couple that would be great on the podcast? Email us, Matt and Becca at engagingstory.com. We'd love to hear from you and get your suggestion. Thanks for listening. Engaging Story, strengthening your marriage one story at a time.